so we've got a hot mic. I always make sure that our friends know that because
Good.
it's important. I don't tell the people I don't like, but anyway, so yeah, we'll be live, and the live stream is set to start automatically in actually 15 seconds. So we're kind of right
I
on
don't
time.
want to walk in front of you to get over there, but I don't really have a choice about that.
Let's move this
I'll move
forward
it further
just a
out,
bit.
yeah. But then I still have to move out a little bit so I can walk behind you. I don't
Oh,
want
I see.
I don't want to walk.
Spread this out of your way.
Yeah.
And then this.
Is it on? I think we're set. Okay.
Welcome to today's Hinckley Forum. My name is Ashton. The Hinckley Institute of Politics is a nonpartisan institute at the University of Utah. The Hinckley provides an array of transformative experiences for students through internships, forums, and classes. Hinckley forums seek to foster public discourse and civil debate on the most current and pressing issues, bringing in local, national, and international thought leaders. Today's forum is titled Beyond Profit: How Business Can Restore Social Connectedness. We are excited to be joined by several great panelists. First, Professor Michael J. Stevens is a Brady Presidential Distinguished Professor of Leadership and a Buehler Research Fellow at the Goddard School of Business and Economics at Weber State University. He is also a founding partner of the Kozai Group, Incorporated, which is a global leadership development and assessment consultancy. Professor John B. Barbuto is the Department of Family and Preventative Medicine, Division of Public Health at the University of Utah. He is also the president of the University Faculty Club. Please join me in welcoming our guests.
I got it. My welcome to you also. I'm going to set the stage for my colleague. Broadly, after World War II, the world shared a common agenda: rebuild. The United States, in particular, was armed with a unique hegemony. We had power, we had weapons, and we had a production economy that was not destroyed by the war. We had the enviable position of producing more than half of the world's output of goods, more than half from one country. And as pointed out by New York Times columnist David Brooks in his book, The Road to Character, we had a surprising humility about all of that. As a consequence, 140 million citizens of the United States at that time had the relatively ubiquitous perspective of the country's agenda: build. Capitalize on the position of hegemony and the feeling of can-do that we had from the outcome of the war. Yes, there were definitely issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we had a bigger agenda at that time in the country. Times have changed. In these times, we can now ask, what are we trying to accomplish? Do we have a shared agenda anymore? Are there, or is the desire for money, fame, and status the only thing we seem to agree on? We can now look at our corporations and businesses and we can ask, how should we measure their success? So I'm John Barbuto. I'm a neurologist with particular interest in evolutionary neurobiology of behavior, and I will moderate for today. I was going to introduce Professor Stevens, but that's been done very well, and so I'm going to skip that part. Would you like more? I can say you're the chairman of the Department of Business Administration. Okay, all right. And he's been doing a lot of research on assessing aptitudes for work success in teams and particularly in diverse cultural environments. All right, let's do this. In that, let's start with his 25 minutes he's going to talk about, and you know what the title is, and then we'll have some questions and other reflections after that. Professor Stevens.
Thank you.
Please give him a hand.
Well, thank you. It's both an honor and a privilege to be here. I have been engaged in this topic for quite some time. I originally came to the business school through the humanities and the liberal arts. And it was at a time before something that we now know as behavioral economists. So, make a long story short, you've all heard of the metaphor, beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. I'm a liberal arts graduate with a degree in history and philosophy, teaching in a business school. So I am a sheep in wolves' clothing, just so you know. As John mentioned in his setup, the historical context matters a lot to understand where we are and why we're here. And so in the period of time, for a couple of decades after World War II, the United States was economically in this state of lethargy. And there was a need for economic revitalization. And at that time, an economist came along and wrote this paper called "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase Its Profits." It was published in 1970 by the soon-to-be Nobel Prize-winning economist by the name of Milton Friedman. His views in this personal statement have had tectonic effects on not only the United States, but the Western world and developing world in the more than half century since then. When he wrote this paper, it was, as it says, a personal essay. It was his own moral and philosophical point of view. He was not laying out laws of economics or finance. They certainly weren't laws of physics or the natural world or even the psychological and social and behavioral sciences. It was his own personal statement. And there are a couple of things that jump out from this essay, but the short takeaway is right there in the title. The social responsibility of business is to increase its profits, and everything else will just follow in order from that, and we'll all be happy and prosperous. Now, let's take a moment and see if we can identify just how seriously we all agree with and take this. So I want to do a quick little poll here of those of you who are present, as well as those of you who are online and streaming. What I want to do is open up this poll and see what kind of consensus we have on these ideas. So, just to get started, make sure we are all on the same page. You can dial in. There's the QR code if you want. As soon as you're logged in, or you're texted in, and you can start responding. Just to make sure this is working, we've got people sharing their answers. Just type in your zip code. We'll see if we get people streaming in. All right, so we got at least a couple of people. A few more coming in. The size of the number indicates the proportion of responses. So lots of people in the 102 area code. All right. So let's jump into the meat of the survey. First question I've got to ask you all that is the most substantive. How much do you agree or disagree with this statement? The main purpose of business is to maximize profits. Strongly agree is a 1, to strongly disagree is a 5. Okay. Interesting, kind of a mix. Something happened where I strongly agree. Okay, there they are, they're back. So actually, the somewhat disagree and strongly disagree is actually a bit higher than I typically see, but of course it is the Hinckley Institute, so what do you a self-selected group. All right, so overwhelmingly, we got more than half, 65%, and another 10% unsure, either strongly agree or somewhat agree, and the one response that's universally the highest is strongly agree, okay? So not much equivocating, although there are some people who are going to debate us on that. Next question. How much do you think faculty and students in business schools, as finance, accounting, econ, marketing, would agree that the main purpose of a business is to maximize profits? Okay, so pretty clear what the thinking is in that regard. 90% in terms of the reputation of faculty and students in the business school either strongly or somewhat agree that this is the case. All right, let's shift a different perspective. How much do you think people who own and run businesses would agree that this is the purpose of their company? Maximize shareholder profits. And again, here we're talking about businesses as opposed to nonprofits or government entities. Okay, so one last question. For society in general, just you do a Gallup polling, average person on the street, how much do you think the average person would agree with that statement? All right, so 70+% we would expect from society in general are going to agree or disagree with that statement. All right, so there's some room for debate, but pretty clear what the consensus is. That by and large, for the most part, we all think that businesses exist to maximize profits, not just profits, but shareholder profits. And my question to all of those who believe this is the case is, says who? Who says that the purpose of a business has to be, should be, must be, ought to be maximizing shareholder profits in particular? And the answer is this guy. This is Milton Friedman from the 1970 essay. He kicked off what's come to be known as agency theory, which is thinking in the 1980s primarily by some very influential business scholar in economics and finance, who basically argued the position, look, companies are owned by people who have shares in those companies. And because they own those companies, they are therefore able to hire agents to own and operate those companies to do their bidding, which as the owner of the company, my bidding is that they make as much money for me as the owner as they possibly can. And not only that, Milton Friedman says, this is the moral obligation that those who own and operate businesses need to pursue. And besides, there's this whole magical thing we call the invisible hand of the marketplace that will make everything right in the end. How many heard of the concept of the invisible hand? Okay, it's the idea that was generated back in the 1700s by Adam Smith, who's often cited as the father of economics, who argues that You know, the way economics and freedom and competitiveness works is that as a thinker back in the 1700s, Adam Smith says, because of the self-interest of the butcher and the bread baker and the brewer pursuing their own self-interest, as if they're being led by a magical hand, I have my supper tonight. Isn't that marvelous? Even miraculous. And we think about it and go, well, yeah, that's actually quite extraordinary that we can all pursue our own individual self-interest, yet collectively, when we come together, it seems to operate magically through this invisible hand to the benefit of us all. The challenge with that thinking is, in order to understand Adam Smith's argument about how that butcher and that baker and that brewer operated within that 18th century Scottish village, we need to back up a few hundred years and ask ourselves, what was the social context for that baker who was baking bread in the 1700s? For that baker who was baking bread in the 1700s, yes, he was pursuing his own self-interest. He would get up early in the morning. He would go about his craft, his task, his profession of baking bread. And he would, if he could figure out how to make it better, faster, cheaper, more wholesome, then he could increase his margin, increase his standard of living. Isn't that wonderful? And as a result of that baker's efforts, the entire village has this wonderful bread to eat that they don't have to bake. It's marvelous. But the context is important. In that village in the 1700s in Scotland, where Adam Smith is writing about the invisible hand, that baker knew every one of his customers. He made eye contact with them every morning when they came to his shop to buy his bread. His children married their children. And when his mother died, they all came and helped him bury his mother. And when his neighbor's barn burned down, they all went and helped that neighbor bury his, rebuild his barn. John, who bakes your bread?
Yeah, somebody out there.
Probably a grandma named Sycamore, right?
Well, probably many somebodies, and maybe it's AI now.
Or Sarah, how many of you know the actual name of the person who bakes your bread personally? I don't either. But I guarantee you this, whoever that person is that bakes your bread and mine, they don't know us either. But I guarantee they know their shift supervisor's name and their plant manager's name and the name of their VP of operations, who knows the CEO, who knows all of their Wall Street investors. And so in this chain of relationships that made this magical invisible hand work, we have to back up and ask ourselves, how does the context in which we live and operate today completely change things? So in order to make sense of this, we have to back up and say, well, okay, the idea of free and competitive markets that Milton Friedman was a huge advocate for, in which I concede quite readily, is the best possible way to organize economic labor and efficiency and capital investments if we're talking about flat screen TVs or articles of clothing. It works very, very well. Couple of conditions have to be met in order for free and unfettered competitive markets to work their magic through the power of the invisible hand. And I've got them here. All parties are equally informed. All parties are free from coercion and manipulation. All parties are equally motivated to, quote, maximize their utility, unquote, which means that both buyers and sellers have to be motivated to make a good deal, to transact a good deal. So if you're a buyer, you want to get more for less. And if you're a seller, you want to sell less for more. And somewhere in there, if you have all the information you need and all the parties are equally free from coercion and manipulation, you will end up coming up with an efficient marketplace where the price meets supply and demand. No one has a monopoly, either as a buyer or as a seller. And the last thing that I've added here that's kind of a twist that you don't see much when people talk about free markets is a working, living, breathing social contract. Now, the reason that's so fundamental is because if you look at these mechanisms that are required for free and competitive markets to work their magic, there are a lot of spheres in modern life where they don't hold. I'll give you a few examples. Education. Now, I've got some students in here. How many of you as students view yourselves as customers? Okay. Most of the hands go up, a few tentative, not sure. So those of you who see yourselves as customers, tell me, one of you at least, what are you buying? What are you buying as a customer on this campus? Education? Who else had hand go up? Human capital? Now, go ahead. A degree or status. What's the difference between buying an education, human capital, and a degree? Are they the same thing? Can you get one without the other? You can certainly get a degree without an education, right? And AI is helping you do that. And you can certainly get an education without a degree. Now, of course, on this campus, like my campus at Weber State, we want to make sure our students get both. But here's the way education as a market space does not work, because if you look at that third bullet, maximizing utility, if you as a student see yourself as a customer buying a degree, you're wasting your time and money on this campus, provided you have access to the internet and a major credit card. You can have your degree in about 15 minutes. Oh, but we want a good quality degree. We want an education. Okay, then that changes the equation, because if you are a student buying an education and you want to maximize your utility, you should be absolutely outraged if a professor ever cancels class or lets you go early or throws out an assignment and does anything at all to lower or cheapen the educational rigor that you are paying your tuition dollars for. There's only one other group of people who are customers who are motivated by minimizing their utility, that is getting less for their money. And I actually had a student point this out to me in class one day years ago when I first started teaching. I had this conversation typically at the beginning of all my classes. And I had one student, when I suggested either you're not customers or you're not rational, he just started laughing. And I looked over at him, and he was like a really fit guy, like a bodybuilder kind of guy. I looked over at him, I missed the punchline. What was so funny? He says, well, actually, Professor, I'm a personal trainer. And that's how I'm paying my way through school. And people hire me, and they pay me by the hour to coach them doing their workouts. He says, you know what happens most of the time? After about 45 minutes, I'll tell my clients, that was an awesome workout. Why don't you go hit the showers early? And they're like, yes. Because I just cheated them out of 25% of what they're paying for, and they're happy with that. What about healthcare? Do people shop around when they need healthcare? Well, you know, for some elective procedures, yeah. But, you know, God forbid something happened to me and I had a cardiac event. My wife calls the ambulance. They come pick me up. They take me to the emergency room. They wire me up. The doctor comes in and says, oh, my God, Mr. Stevens, you're having a cardiac episode. We need to get you up to the emergency room and do triple bypass surgery immediately. I'm not going to stop and say, you know what? I think I'm going to shop around a bit. I hear the hospital at the U is doing a 2-for-1 special on bypass surgery, so, you know, they're going to throw in the gastric thing as well. Let me get back. You got any coupons? Maybe that. No. For most of that kind of health care, we do not operate as rational, thoughtful customers. Here's some others. We could talk about those. News and related media, including social media. How many have Instagram accounts? How many of you pay for the monthly subscription to your Instagram account? Nobody, because there's no such thing. How about Facebook? Anybody have a paid Facebook subscription? No, of course not. So those of you who use it, we're not really customers. And yet Mark Zuckerberg is a billionaire many, many times over. What is the business model if none of us who use that platform are paying any money to Mark Zuckerberg? How does he get his billions? Selling our eyeballs to his advertisers. And you know what gets our eyeballs onto not only news media, but social media more than anything else? Dopamine hits that come through likes and tweets and retweets and followers. And nothing gets eyeballs more on news and social media than outrage and anger. And we wonder why we've got our information bubbles, our silos. Because there is a business model that rewards individuals for these very things. So let me jump real quick to what I'm trying to suggest here, which is the idea that there is a better way forward. So just to kind of back up, give you a sense for where we've been and where I plan to go. We're going to shift directions here just a bit. First thing I've been trying to do is talk a little bit about the diagnosis that's at the heart of our social disconnection through business. And one is that because of this view, remember our polling suggested most of us have bought into, and society in general, in particular the people who own and operate businesses, we bought into this doctrine, this philosophy, this perspective that the purpose of a business is to maximize shareholder profits. First thing we do is we find pressures for ethical misconduct are at their highest. And the reason that happens is we've only got two levers in business to make profits happen. Increase revenue, decrease expenses, or a combination of the two. And we have more time, we can go through the host and the litany of examples from businesses that have fallen victim to these pressures. But overwhelmingly, the vast majority of business and ethical scandals are driven by these pressures to maximize shareholder profits. For me, the way forward is to step back and say, why have we put our chiefest idol in our holiest part of the temple? Why have we elevated the idea of profits, which are a necessity, to the status of terminal value? That's what I want to talk about here with the second observation that I have is to the degree that if you are someone who runs a business, who owns and operates a business, if you put maximizing shareholder profits above any and all of the considerations, you will fail to leverage the one thing that could be your greatest and most enduring competitive edge. And that's the thing that most of the people who are in the business disciplines fail to see, although it's staring them right in the face. Show you what I'm talking about. I don't know if any of you saw this meme. It was floating around a couple of years ago. It's a picture of a fellow who owns a business leaning against a brand new Lamborghini. And it says across the top, you can read it, it says, "My boss arrived at work in a brand new Lamborghini." I said, "Wow, that's an amazing car." And my boss replied, "If you work hard, put all your hours in, and strive for excellence, I'll get another one next year." How many of you, as employees in a for-profit, profit-maximizing business, are going to willingly, passionately wrap your hearts, minds, and souls around the business goal of making this owner richer and more successful? Not a single hand. People, do you not have a work ethic? What kind of students are you? Don't you know this is the way the world works? No, because we're not fools. We all know what's happening. And so the question, how willingly and passionately will employees wrap their hearts, minds, and souls around the mission of making bosses and owners like this richer, more successful? The answer is we won't. Company is a very interesting name for business, isn't it? I didn't realize this until I had grown up a little bit, but when I was a little boy, maybe 5 or 6 years of age, my father owned his own business. It was an accounting firm. I was only 5 or 6 years at the time, but I knew that my father was proud of this business that he owned. He would always talk about his company. And one Saturday when I was being particularly rambunctious, my mom told my dad, take your boy to the office. My dad had to go and do some work on a Saturday. He said, take that boy to the office. I went with my dad, and my dad had to do some work, and to keep me out of his hair, he introduced me to the photocopier in his office. As a 6-year-old kid, I was in seventh heaven. I could not believe that such a thing existed. So I spent the day just having a ball. In fact, if you had asked me at that time what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said, I want to be a photocopier man. A couple of months later, my mom comes to me and my siblings and says, you kids, it's Saturday, but tonight you kids need to stay in the basement and watch TV because your father and I are having company over to the house. And I thought, what? That makes no sense. My dad's company was an office. And Mom says she's going to be having company over. And for a few seconds, I got really excited. I thought, oh my God, Dad's bringing the photocopier home. He says, no. But think about it. Why do we use the word company to describe a business? You ever thought of that? And the answer is that business is from start to finish a social enterprise. It is commerce where people engage in commerce with other people. That is the essence of business. It's a social enterprise. But when you look at this question of people, especially the employees in a business, do a little pop quiz right here. How many would agree that the first question is true? People are a company's most important, most valuable resource. How many agree with that? True. All right, what about the second question? People are your main source for headaches and hassles. So which is it? Kind of a dichotomy, isn't it? Well, what I would suggest is there are two things that make human beings essential and unique. Our emotions and creativity. Now, AI has kind of eclipsed the second, hasn't it? The creativity part, and yet AI has learned from humans. But these two things make humans fundamentally different from all the other sorts of activities that we engage in business. All the resources that a business needs to transform raw materials into products and services, people are uniquely different. And the reason this matters is because when employees show up at work, they are free to exercise discretion on how engaged they will be. All the way from the top of this motivation continuum, which I would argue is enthusiasm, passion, high engagement, to compliance, which is in the middle. You notice I have a 0 to the left of compliance because that's where people do just the bare minimum. For them, their job is a transaction. I do the things on my job description, and in exchange, I get a paycheck and a benefits package every other Friday. That's a transactional deal. Resistance is actually negative motivation because this is where employees are actually working to thwart the activities of the business. Sabotage, subterfuge. And you might think, why would people do that? Bite the hand that feeds them, because sometimes the way the hand treats you is so demeaning, so degrading, so disrespectful, that your sense of fairness and justice and equity requires that you even the scales. So you look at what's going on here with this question of working for a boss like this, the kind of attitude where the business sees the employees as an expense, and you got two levers to maximize your profits, increase revenue or minimize expenses. What's the largest single expense in virtually all businesses? Anybody? Payroll, right? Payroll. So if your employees are an expense and you're trying to maximize your shareholder profits like Milton Friedman told you to, you're going to squeeze your employees as low as you possibly can. And what happens is you end up undermining or destroying the very thing that is the heart of what you're trying to achieve. So in short, I'm gonna cut to the chase here because we've only got a few more minutes. And one of the things I suggest we have to do in business in order to fix this problem is we need to create a cultural environment in our companies where people show up every day ready and willing to wrap their hearts, minds, and souls around the purpose of the business, which means it can't be what Milton Friedman told us it ought to be. And what's more, we need to stop teaching ethics. Ethics in the sense that the philosophers tell us, the rule-based ethics. The virtue-based ethics are really what we need. This is where we need to start teaching character and values. And that's maybe a longer discussion we can get into later. But the short of it, I'm going to jump to the conclusion here and offer you just a real quick case study. Just 2 more minutes, then we'll do Q&A. And that is, I'm going to introduce you to what I call a pro-social approach to leadership. It's a way of capturing this discretionary employee engagement in ways that move them to the top end of the motivation continuum and generate shared flourishing with your company culture and your people. So the heart of it is this motivation continuum, right? How do you create a business where employees show up every day passionate, highly engaged, and enthusiastic and ready to go above and beyond the call of duty? And the answer is you have to give them some purpose other than maximizing profits for shareholders and CEOs. It's got to be an authentic purpose, an authentic, genuine meaning. And if you do that, you can build a company culture around an organization that values individual well-being, that values the contributions and honors the contributions of all stakeholders, the employees, suppliers, customers, the local communities who educated your employees. But it all starts over here on the left with leadership, okay? The heart of the malaise in modern American business lies at the core values and the character of those who run and operate, and those of us on college and university campus who are teaching all of our students and current and future business managers that their moral obligation in life is to maximize shareholder profits. And what happens is we end up imbuing all of our students with really good resume virtues, but they're bereft of the eulogy virtues. The eulogy virtues are the kind of things that they say about you at the end of your life when they come and talk to you about your funeral. Those are the eulogy virtues. Now, you can talk more about that maybe during the Q&A, but it's got to start over here on the left. You need to work with leadership because company culture is the one phenomenon of organizational life that is subject to the law of gravity. It flows from the top down. And so business leaders will create company cultures based on the values that they have because their values will shape all the decisions to become the company culture that employees live in. It's the climate for them. Now, if you're able to pull all this off, what happens on the right-hand side of this slide is you get all kinds of improvements in predicted outcomes. And one quick story, and I'll end with this. Everything I have highlighted in red on these 4 boxes in this model are a case study where over the last 2 years, I've been working with a $300 million manufacturing plant in northern Utah, about 16 months of leadership training on the left-hand side here. Character, values, respectful leadership skills, but still results oriented. In a matter of 16 months, 125 of their team leads, supervisors, middle managers, and the top operations CEO team went through this training. By the end of it all, we had decreased company turnover by 90%. They increased their production throughput by 55%, lowered their financial costs 30%, and increased labor productivity by 49%. All while increasing employee pay by 22%. The only thing I regret in taking on that project is that I agreed to let them pay me up front instead of a percentage on the back end. But, all right, so I'll stop there, John, and my guess is we'll have some Q&A. So go ahead.
Thank you. Let's see. Let me just reflect on a couple of points. First of all, this isn't about us. This is about you. You are coming into your lives, to your careers, to your place, to where you're going. This is about you. Now, at the beginning, you answered the question that you thought that companies are there to maximize shareholder profits, to maximize the profit of the corporation. And you said that's what they mostly are about. It was 90%. How many of you want to work for that company? Because what happens if you work for that company? You are made fungible. Do you know what the word fungible means? Easily replaced with an equivalent part. You are made fungible and you are reduced. Do you want to live on that planet? Do you want to live on a planet which says, how do we make your life be good? Work for you. Lead you to wherever you're good in your life, whatever it is that you have the skills, the capabilities, the interests to do. So this is really about you. This is about how we build this. Now, one of the strategic problems we have in this whole agenda is how do you measure something other than profit? It's very easy for a corporation to measure its success in terms of its profit. It's very easy to track that over time. But how do you measure and track employee fulfillment? The company being fulfilled in its purpose, leading to a society which we want to live in, on a planet we want to live on. How do you measure that? That's a challenge for you, because that's what we have to do if we're going to have something other than profit. Because why? The leaders of the company are going to get hired to do what the company says it's there to do, and they're going to get fired if they don't do it. So if we can't measure your success as an employee, if we can't measure your satisfaction, your engagement, your connection to that company, then that's going to wash to the side, because profit will be the only thing you can measure. So as you go on in this journey and you look for where you're going to be, look for how can this be measured in a human perspective so that we do something positive on this planet. This is where we want to live. You're not going to get to Alpha Centauri, at least not now. Right, okay, so questions. First of all, let's just jump in to see what your questions are, and then we'll see where we go from there. Please, a question?
If you have a question, I'm going to run the microphone to you so that folks who have joined us online can hear. And who was it who had a question? Right.
When you're building a new business or even an existing business, do you believe that like transparency is a big part of keeping a good culture for the employees alive? We see a lot like with Starbucks, they'll post like the big profits that the company made, and then the workers don't really feel like their lives are getting better. So do you think it's important to have like transparency across the board on like profits and wages, or do you think that should be a little bit more restricted?
I would say that the transparency is important, but it's more important to stop the bleeding, to be transparent about how bad you're bleeding. And what I mean by that is that when we put profits as our prime directive as a business, we've fundamentally inverted means versus ends. So the other way of phrasing this philosophy that business exists to maximize shareholder profits is to rephrase that question and ask it this way. Whether you're Starbucks, whether you're starting your own company, whether you're any other business, do you run your business to make money, or do you make money to run your business? That distinction is absolutely critical, because in that first question, everything is subordinated to how much money you make for the owners. The second question, do you make money to run a business, suggests, rightly so, that the money is not negotiable. It doesn't matter how lofty the purpose and the mission of your business is if you don't have the money, because you will be insolvent and your mission isn't going to matter because you won't be around. But if you see money as the means to an end, it fundamentally changes the equation, because money is now something you use to be a purpose maximizer. It's what the philosophers tell us is the danger of inverting means and ends, right? Money is always going to be part of the business equation. And it's part of nonprofits, it's part of healthcare, it's part of government entities. It's always part of the equation. The question is that your terminal goal? Is that the reason you exist? Or is it a resource that you use to advance your purpose?
Other questions?
Yeah, to go along with that, I was thinking maybe purposes could be like an instrumental goal to maximize profits. So like, instead, like, why couldn't it be that like company creates company culture so that they can maximize profits, because they know that employees will therefore be more harder workers if they have a good company culture.
Yeah, because your employees are not idiots and they will figure it out. Because at the end of the day, your terminal values will always trump the decisions you make with regard to your instrumental values. Right? So if you're running a business, you think, oh, okay, I just need to convince my employees that they're the most important, valuable resource, and that we're going to build a company culture around our mission or our purpose. But what's going to happen is every time push comes to shove and the managers, the CEO, the executives need to make decisions about who gets hired, who gets fired, who gets laid off, who gets raises, who gets bonuses, they're going to tip their hand. And the employees are going to figure it out. And what's more, I would say you're going to make things worse, because your employees are now going to end up being much more jaded and cynical, because they'll be able to see the hypocrisy. And it's just like, if you're going to be a profit whore, just be a profit whore and tell people that's what you are. It's like, I actually respect that more than somebody says, well, I'm going to pretend that, we're all about our mission and our people, and at the end of the day, I'm going to lay off my plant in Ogden and move it to China because as the CEO, I'll get a $20 million stock bonus. But it's like, people know. They'll figure it out.
There's a fundamental difference also between having a company that exists to make a profit versus having a company that exists to create and offer a product. So we will be better collectively and individually if we focus on what are we creating, what are we offering people, what are we offering the country, the planet, each other, and go for that. And if we offer something good, we will make a profit, and that's fine. That's, profit. You have to have a profit if you're going to exist. Otherwise, it goes under, as you said.
In fact, one of the exercises I have students do in my leadership class to connect with their character and values, I have them do a self-interview to discover what their real terminal values are in life. And so the best way to do that is you start with something that's important to you right now, like your degree. Like if I were to ask you, I'd say, why do you want your degree? I don't want to put you on the spot. Would you let me?
Yeah.
Okay, why do you want a degree?
To further my position in life, to have status.
And why do you want to further your position in life and have status?
So I can provide public health services to the public.
And why do you want to provide public health services to the public?
To increase quality of life for many people.
And why do you want to increase quality of life for many people? Just because, right?
20 questions.
Well, see, that series of events, if you start with something that somebody wants and you want to ferret out whether it's an instrumental or terminal value, you ask them, why do you want that? And whatever the answer is to that, you ask them again, and why do you want that? And whatever the answer is to that, you ask them again, and why do you want that? Until you get to an answer, they say, I just want to improve quality of life for people. And I say, why do you want that? They look befuddled. What do you mean why? I just do. That's the terminal value. And so what happens with money, in all the years that I've had students, this has been going on more than a decade, where I have them do those self-interviews, and I ask them to say, so why do you want your degree? A lot of them will say, because they want to improve their job prospects. I say, why do you want to improve your job prospects? They say, because I want to make more money. And I say, why do you want to make more money? How many times would you guess students look at me like I have three heads and say, what do you mean why do I want to make money? I just want to have more money. How many times do you think that's happened, that was their terminal value? Never. Never. It's never happened once. I've never had a student who says, I want to make more money, and I ask them why, and they say, what do you mean why? I just want more money. As human beings, we all know that money is an instrumental value to get us to other things that are more important. There is always something after when they say, I want to get a degree, to get a better job, to make more money. There's always something after this, because I want to take care of my family. I want to put a roof over their head. I want to feed them. I want to have financial independence. I want freedom. There's always something after. And yet, what do we do with these legal entities that we grant personhood under the law? Corporations. You and I exist and have personhood under the law because we were born. Corporations have to apply and get a legal charter. They're granted legal status of personhood because we've collectively made laws that allow that to happen. Then what do we tell these individuals that we grant personhood to? Go off and be a sociopath. And we wonder why we're so rife with ethical scandal and people who go to work who just see it as a transaction and go, oh God, 30 more years and I can retire. Okay, keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. And there's no sense of purpose and meaning and fulfillment. Anyway, I get kind of ranty on this, so.
It's important. Other questions?
Right here.
Throughout your talk, I just kind of because you kept talking about like creating a better environment for the employee and like wanting to, it's more of a bottom up versus a top down. Is that solely in like a relationship way, or like, because I don't know, the way what I kept coming to my mind when you were discussing this is like looking at like tech companies and how they create this like almost childlike playground, and when they create their campuses for their businesses like Google and such, is that like a false promise of like, here, we'll have a fun company for you to work at, but at the end of the day, it's still a profit maximizing company? Or is that a different ends to the same means that you're discussing?
It's, well, every company is going to have its own different flavor, and it's really going to depend on the core values of leadership. I could say working for a company that tries to make it fun and enjoyable for me would be preferable to a company that makes it a sweatshop. But at the end of the day, what happens when push comes to shove and Google and Apple and other tech companies have to start reining in costs? Now all of a sudden they don't have all the perks to throw at their employees. And one of the dangers also is when I talk this way with managers who are actually running companies, and I say, you know, you really need to leverage your culture and your people for your competitive edge. They go, oh, we got a great company culture. I go, oh, really? Tell me about it. Oh, yeah, we put in beanbag chairs and hammocks and ping pong tables in the break room and a free cereal bar for our employees. So we got a great company culture. I go, well, okay, but what's going on day in and day out in terms of the lived experience of your employees? Do you honor and respect their innate worth and dignity of human beings? Because if that's the case, a human being can never be viewed as a means to an end. A human being is always going to be an end in and of themselves. And yet, what do we call, what does the R stand for in the HR department? Human what? Resources. It's right there in the name. You've got eyes to see and ears to hear. Your company is telling you you're expendable, you're a resource. I bring you in, I give you a salary and benefits package, and it's a transaction. It's not a relationship. And so one of the other things you didn't have time to get into with respect to the unintended consequences of the shift that Milton Friedman put us on since 1970 is that we have turned off the moral lens as a society, and we have put on transactional economic goggles through which we see everyone and everything. Much to our dismay, because it has obliterated the social contract, which is a web of interdependent moral obligations we have to each other to treat each other with dignity and respect. And when you turn off that moral lens, that social connection lens, and you see everything through economic transactions, the social contract goes away. So when you create a company culture that is generally rooted in a vibrant, healthy social contract, you will have the kind of relationships that are really part of the essence of the question, which is why I tell, whether they're tech companies or any other, you cannot pretend to be authentic. You can't. People will figure it out over the long run anyway.
When we build good companies and good organizations, we have a clarity of thinking about what we're all in this to do together. So if it turns out that to get away from the rigors of coding, you need some time to play foosball or something. And that's what produces good outcome. It allows the brain to reset. It allows people to get, themselves reorganized and go back. If that's what it takes, then that's part of the cooperative agreement that we have as a company, as an organization.
So, and I would also build on that and say, what you need to do is create a context of well-being and flourishing for your employees, which kind of begs the question, what do you do with salaries then? Because everybody's got to get paid, right? I mean, for most of us, our salaries are the basis for our standard of living. The best advice when it comes to extrinsic motivators like salary, the best advice is pay people enough so that they can stop thinking about money. And then create an environment in which you can leverage the essence of positive psychology so that people experience flourishing and well-being at work. Positive psychology says, look, if you want people to flourish, if you want people to be connected, you need to give them purpose and meaning. You need to give them work that they enjoy. You need to give them an opportunity for growth and development. You need to give them an environment in which they can have positive human connections. You need to give them an appropriate degree of freedom and discretion over what they do and how they do it. And you build a place where those things are the intrinsic motivators. Your employees will respond and say, thank God it's Monday. I'll come in early, I'll go home late because this is a place where I really flourish, where my well-being is consistent with the things that are important to me. And, oh yeah, every other Friday I get a paycheck and a benefits package, but thank God it's Monday, as opposed to when your employment is just an economic transaction, especially an extrinsic transaction, like pay is. You know, the best way to destroy somebody's intrinsic motivation to do something, you know what it is? Turn it into an extrinsic motivator. You know, the best way to destroy a child's love of reading, pay them for reading. Create an incentive plan. Put stickers on the whiteboard and give them a pizza party if they all read their books.
We are out of time. Be well and flourish.
Thank you for joining us today, and please join me in thanking our guests.